Peter, thank you so much, and Peter will be back. I'll have a conversation one-on-one with Peter in just a moment. But I'm delighted to kick off the first of our conversations. And you can see there on screen, I'm delighted to welcome once again Paul Griffiths, who is the Chief Executive of the Dubai Airports Company. Paul, come on down.
Morning, Ben. Thank you.
Lovely to see you again, Paul. Tons for us to talk about. While we were just listening to Peter there as well, running through what we want to discuss, and I don't think we're going to have enough time, but there will be time at the end for your questions. So if you have any pressing questions for Paul or any of our other panelists, do not worry, I will get to you, and I'll run around with a microphone a little later. Paul, nice to see you again. We have to stop meeting like this. But look, I've just been over on the airline keynote stage, and we're talking now a lot about geopolitical issues. And look, you're in Dubai, you're in the Middle East. We know there's a lot of pressure in the Middle East right now. I just wonder, first of all, about what that means for you and where it leaves you as an airport in Dubai there in the UAE.
Well, I think the first thing, Ben, is we need a bit of context here, and that is Ukraine is closer to Amsterdam than Tel Aviv and Lebanon is to Dubai. And clearly, obviously, we are concerned about the conflict. We're very concerned about the human cost of that and the geopolitical impact. But as far as Dubai is concerned, we've seen no adverse impact on traffic thus far. And in fact, if you look historically, and this is not a statistic I'm particularly proud of, but actually Dubai traffic has been remarkably robust during periods of conflict, and people see Dubai as a sort of safe haven. And I just hope that the conflict will de-escalate rather than escalate, because escalation is no one's friend in this case. So we hope that it won't actually affect traffic, the social and economic impact of the whole world, really, and let's hope for a de-escalation.
Yeah, when I lived in Dubai, it was described to me as a pretty dodgy, Dubai, was a safe street in a pretty dangerous or difficult neighbourhood, and I think that's pretty true sometimes, isn't it, especially right now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you do at the airport. As ever, transformation underway. Where are you now in terms of the work that is going on? Because I know at DXB, there's still a lot of work going on, but also a big focus now on DWC.
That's correct. I mean, I think we've realised that ultimately for Dubai to continue to realise its ambition for the city and for the aviation industry, which are actually completely interlinked, and I think probably we understand that better than most other cities in the world, we have got to continue the growth and the facilitation of capacity. When I arrived 17 years ago, and seems a long time now, although it's gone incredibly quickly, Sheikh Ahmed, my chairman, said to me, I only have one objective, and that is never constrain the growth of aviation in Dubai. And therefore, I think it's been pretty easy to understand whether that objective has been achieved or not. And I think what we're trying to do now is continue to do what we've done for the last 15 years, and that is maximize the capacity available at DXB. And actually that's a twofold strategy. One, improve the technology so that we can enhance capacity, but at the same time actually transform the business from an infrastructure management business into a proper hospitality business and improve the service level. Ultimately, in the longer term, what we then will have to manage is the world's largest airport transition to Al Maktoum International DWC Phase 2, which will have an ultimate capacity of about 260 million passengers. But the trick, I think, there is that we've got to stop the devil being in the design, and that, I think, is the problem with airport design at the moment. We've got to use whatever technology is around at the time, and I think we're having quite a good time at DXB now trialing new techniques and new technology to maximize passenger flow to get the design of DWC Phase 2 absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm looking at your numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong on these, Paul, but what, currently about 90 million?
93 million actually projected. That's when I checked this morning. It may have gone up since then.
Next 10 years, about 120 million. I mean, and that's without, as you said, building extra infrastructure. This is about making what you've got work better.
That's exactly right. What we've done is we've realised that an airport really is two component parts. There's the flow part and the dwell part. The flow part is mainly check-in and arrivals and baggage delivery, where what we have to do is put speed into this. I think no one wants to spend more time at an airport than's absolutely necessary, particularly with check-in and security, immigration. So we've tried to combine all of those when we can't eliminate them totally. And then you see what that allows us to do is focus on the dwell spaces, which is what we have to do to make things much, much higher quality than they are now. So we're working with some world-class brands to uplift the offer. It's very interesting, actually. Travel retail is going through quite a difficult patch at the moment. Sales are down because the role of airport duty-free, as it used to be known, is now slightly irrelevant. As you know, in the UK, they've scrapped VAT exemption on duty-free sales. That's had an impact on the industry. And now I think people have a bit more of an expectation than picking up a bottle of whiskey and some cigarettes in duty-free. So now it's working with brands to understand the sophistication of the retail environment and transforming that as well. So dwell spaces, I think, have got to be upgraded from the passenger perspective. They're much more about a mix of seating, food and beverage, and also retail. So we've got to get that mix right and still preserve the integrity of passenger space and get the flow and the systems, get rid of all the legacy stuff that has plagued the industry for years, get people to that space near their aircraft in record time. That's the idea.
Yeah, and we're going to look at that a little later, actually, in terms of sort of how two, very seemingly similar passengers can want a very different experience of that space, and how they progress through that airport can be very different depending who they are and why they're there. You talk then, and there's sort of common parlance is that airports are becoming like cities. They've got everything, they cater to everyone. You're not just a transport business, you are everything else, your hospitality, your retail, and your leisure. There is a danger, though, that we build these airports bigger and bigger and bigger, and we put more and more stuff in, and actually they become unwieldy, they're unmanageable, they are just too big. And this is also true of aircraft themselves. Actually, we're seeing that reversal where this becomes a bit more about point to point. How do you use this as a means of transport, but you do it quickly? And airports are getting too big, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I think the thing is that as I said, the problem is the design of airports is not keeping up with the pace of technology, because the good thing about seeing speed in that flow area of the experience is actually you need less space for more people. So if you can put speed and flow, a bit like a very efficient sort of metro system, if you can get people flowing through that very, very quickly, you don't need the space. And I think the problem is we used to build vast areas for people to queue, but that's solving the wrong problem. Let's get rid of the queue and build those spaces much more efficiently. And I think the difficulty is with scale, you lose intimacy. And the one constant when airports are getting bigger and bigger, our legs are the same length. So if you don't mind getting your steps in, that's okay. But if you're rushing for a flight or trying to make a short connection, having a vast airport that you have to walk several kilometers is no fun as a traveler. So I think the trick is to create a flow space that's incredibly efficient, and then have a series of dwell spaces, individual concourses, that are linked very efficiently to that central flow space, and keep the intimacy of each small airport by building many small airports in one. I think that's the trick, and I think airport designers need to think very, very hard about that proposition, because the interface between technology and passenger flow is something that airport design has not kept up with.
And if there is a renewed focus maybe away from hub to hub, should we also be thinking about the role that regional airports play in this game as well, and actually the connectivity between those airports, and saying, look, we've probably got some regional airports, certainly true in the UK, but clearly elsewhere around the world, that are underused, they're underinvested, and actually could play a much bigger role in the country's offering as a transport hub.
I think that's absolutely right. And the thing is, you see, people say to me, look, obviously being a hub, you support the concept that the hub is the way forward. And actually, look, hub and point to point, despite what Boeing and Airbus might tell you, are actually complementary strategies, because a hub thrives on the diversity of its network. We've got 260 cities in 104 countries served by 101 airlines in Dubai. And actually, I want to make that city number grow as much as we possibly can. And so having the combination of point-to-point and a hub is a very good thing. But on the point of regional airports, it's interesting. The future of aviation seems to be in smaller aircraft with much longer legs. And of course, that's a problem for large airports that can't expand because of slot difficulties. But for regional airports, smaller aircraft means a much, much broader number of destinations that are commercially viable. So I think the difficulty of building and expanding large airports in most developed communities will be overcome by more intelligent use of regional airport capacity with smaller aircraft. But there needs to be a ground transport revolution to make that happen. And I think this is where driverless vehicles and more efficient micro transport systems will come into their own to make that transition from ground to air much, much more slick in the future.
And I know we're talking particularly about airports here, but that is also true of aircraft themselves. And the technology that is available on these new fleets means we can do things very differently. And therefore it has implications for how you design airports and the role that that airport plays. Just explain.
That's absolutely right. And I think what we cannot avoid talking about is the sustainability challenges, because it seems that smaller aircraft will be able to meet some of the sustainability challenges by using alternative energy. Actually, one of the UAV vehicles in the States is now using a combination of hydrogen fuel cell and electric power for its rotors. So if that's the way technology is going to go with smaller aircraft, that has profound impacts, I think, on aerial technology. And it's probably an easier transition than it is with autonomous vehicles on our roads, because autonomous vehicles on the road have to mix with so many different other types of traffic. And the biggest problem, of course, is the human is presenting us with an issue on the ground. But in the air, the network that controls air traffic control in the future could actually do all the separation and make it a much safer environment. So I think the sustainability angle, the aircraft scale angle, and the ability to realize greater capacity in the air through advanced networks, that's going to be transformational over time.
Paul, I know you're going to join us for the panel a little later, but before you go, I know you want to show us a little video about the work that you're doing at Dubai. Just explain what it is before we show it.
Well, it's interesting. I was doorstepped on live TV by someone who asked me why customer service in airports was so dreadful. And I said, well, the problem, I think, is too many airports have too many stakeholders. It's that ratio of responsibility to authority, which is a problem. And so what we have done is realize that fact and worked very, very closely with all of the stakeholders at all points in service delivery to try and really engage them in what we call 1DXB, bring your Dubai-ness to work. That's the idea. The idea being that what we want to do is realize that the customer is there for all of us and we all have a role in serving them. So we made a video to really sort of bring home what that means and how we work together. And this is using real people, not actors, and it really shows, I think, how customer service is the responsibility for every single person who works at an airport.
Okay, let's have a look, please. baton relay, isn't it? Paul, thank you so much. You'll be back with us in just a little while, but ladies and gents, Paul Griffiths, Dubai Airports. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.